The heartbreakingly beautiful vampire Dali became a widower after losing his wife. Tearfully, he raised their 2 young children and sought vengeance for his wife. Oh my goodness, it's so tragic. Dali, now a widower, is a member of a special division known as Vlad. 10 months into his service, he accompanied his colleague Fra to meet their boss, John. They were tasked with investigating a series of serial killings happening across the region. Apparently, there seemed to be no clear connection among the victims. However, John mentioned that each victim was found with a card stating, "Death comes equally." From the information on the cards, it appeared that the murderers believed in a figure known as Trump. Wait, who? Are Trump's fervent followers committing these murders? Let's refer to this Trump simply as Origin to avoid confusion with stories about the former US president and his ardent fans. To the outside world, Origin might seem like a mythical tale, but John knew that Origin truly existed. This entity was the progenitor of all vampires and still lived. Each vampire was spiritually connected to this Origin, whose existence was akin to a deity. If Origin's peace of mind was disturbed, it could potentially lead to the collapse of vampire society. Thus, the stakes of their mission were extremely high. Yet, Dali outright refused the task. With no other options, John had to gather other members of Vlad for a meeting. The incident was likely the work of a cult that worshipped Origin. John wanted Dali to lead an investigative team, but he understood Dali's reasons for refusal. A visit to Dali's home would make it clear to the other team members why. So, Fra took Dino and Enrique for a visit. Dino couldn't understand why Dali, the head of the prestigious Derico family, one of the oldest bloodlines, known for producing prominent figures and being exceptional himself, would refuse the mission. The elderly butler led them unsteadily to Dali's room, cautioning them not to be surprised by anything they saw. Upon entering, they saw the usually dignified and elegant Dali with a baby on his back, chasing after his loudly crying older son around the room. After finally settling the child to sleep, Fra was unable to accept the situation. He believed that childcare should be left to nannies, especially since there were more important tasks at hand. Dali retorted that everyone present was a husband and a father, and should understand his position. For instance, Fra's child was the same age as Dali's eldest son. Enrique had 5-year-old twin daughters, and Dino's son was nearly 7. These men were all handsomely married young, yet they generally left child-rearing to nannies. Dino, as a high noble, expressed that someone of his status didn't have time to care for children. They, as members of Vlad, had more critical duties like maintaining the stability of Origin and ensuring the continuation of the vampire lineage. However, Dali viewed Origin as nothing more than a ridiculous deity, arguing that managing its emotions was less important than changing his child's diapers. Moreover, he had an agreement concerning this matter, which Fra was also aware of. At that moment, Dali was amusing his younger child who kept crying. Fra came over, urging Dali to return to work. Dali handed the child to him abruptly. Dino and Enrique peeked from behind the door, but the three were clueless about soothing the child, and were all thumbs until the headmaid managed to calm the baby. Fra questioned the headmaid why she let Dali get so involved in childcare. She sighed, saying she had tried to persuade him otherwise, but Dali insisted on raising his children himself. She believed Fra should understand. By then, Dali had returned with a bottle warmed to the right temperature, stating his commitment to care for his children and his decision to take a leave of absence. However, Dino disagreed, emphasizing the importance of their work with Vlad. Fra then asked Dali if his actions were because of his late wife Frida's last words. Frida was Dali's wife, and the person who killed her was none other than Fra. Fra asked if Dali hated him, but Dali shook his head, expressing his intent to raise his children to be exceptional individuals. Fra, not wanting Dali to waste away, suggested Dali balance childcare with work, citing his view of Dali as a perfect nobleman. Dali agreed, but on the condition that his 3 teammates also balance parenting with their work, joking about how they'd work hard by day and be both dad and mom by night, which he found amusing. Consequently, the murder case files were moved to Dali's house, which also doubled as a daycare. Dali, with his second son on his back, was reading a report at his desk. Enrique's twin daughters ran over and asked him what work was, then started playing hide-and-seek around the room. Fra's son started crying loudly after his snack was taken, quickly causing to cry as well. The office was a scene of chaos. After much effort, they managed to get the older children to sleep. Fra declared that working while taking care of children was impossible. Dolly retorted, "Then why did you ask me to do both? Don't you realize it hurts unless the knife is in your own flesh?" After finally soothing to sleep, Dolly brought up a previous serial killer case, suggesting the murderer was part of a 5-person gang. The notes left behind at murder scenes were not to identify targets, but to publicize the existence of their gang. Dolly suspected the criminals would strike again. Just then, his eldest son Raphael woke up. Fra's son, Angelico, said he needed to use the bathroom, which Fra dismissed as a trivial interruption. However, Dolly led both children to the restroom. Frustrated, Fra, unable to forsake his noble dignity, followed to accompany his son to the bathroom. Because cried again, Dolly sent Raphael back to his room. Meanwhile, Enrique and Dino discussed the death of Dolly's wife and the attack on the Derico family. In vampire lore, a bite creates an absolute master-servant bond between the biter and the bitten. Dolly's wife had been controlled by her attacker after being bitten, which is why Fra killed the attacker. The specific details of the incident were not recorded in detail. Enrique remarked that children are noisy when awake, but incredibly cute when asleep. Dino objected, saying that children are adorable even when awake. Just then, Enrique noticed that Dino's son, Theodore, was missing. Outside, Raphael wanted to go to the bathroom and was about to call Theodore to join him. Theodore envied their fatherly attention and felt that, like him, Raphael might not receive enough of it because he also had a younger brother. At that time, Dolly was soothing When Fra returned with his son, he found Raphael crying with wet pants, which made Angelico start crying too. Fra was overwhelmed but insisted on proving he could balance work and childcare, so he took both children to bathe. That evening, Dino took his son, Theodore, home. The butler could tell from Dino's expression that his work wasn't going well. Since Vlad's department is classified, the butler didn't ask for details, only noting that Theodore seemed upset. Dino thought Theodore was well-behaved and didn't require much attention. The butler suggested Dino remarry, but Dino felt that after several wives had left, there was no need to look for another. However, the butler argued that Theodore needed a mother. Dino believed a mother shouldn't just be a tool for serving children, and had promised Dolly to balance work and childcare. Nobility meant keeping promises, though Dino was unaware that Theodore also longed for his father's attention. Meanwhile, Enrique was having dinner with his wife. She knew that he worked in Vlad's secret department, but didn't understand why he had to take their 2 daughters out. Enrique explained that it was a requirement from the team leader. Vlad's main goal is to sustain the vampire species' living environment, and Dolly was so capable that his boss insisted on making him the team leader. Enrique had no choice but to let his daughters endure this hardship. The 2 daughters clung to their parents, asking for bedtime stories, creating a warm family atmosphere. At the same time, Angelico, holding his pillow, went to sleep with his father, Fra, who, as a proud noble, often acted aloof. Angelico, blushing, said he had enjoyed bathing together that day. Fra only smiled after his child had left the room. Dolly was busy soothing to sleep, while Raphael slept in front of his mother's photo. Seeing his wife's photo, Dolly sighed, acknowledging that no matter how capable he was, raising children was not easy. That same night, the murder organization Dolly and his team were investigating acted again. They encountered the Blood Alliance police, but unexpectedly wiped them out. One severely injured officer was taken to the hospital after being bitten on the neck, apparently controlled by the criminals. Through this officer, the criminals conveyed a message, stating that everything followed the will of Origin and they were soul fairy. After delivering the message, the surviving officer jumped to his death. Dolly lamented that he had underestimated these people. Dino's son, Theodore, appears to be the most well-behaved among the children. However, his subconscious doll urges him to seek his father's affection and suggests he play with other children. Theodore is reluctant to admit this and just wants to grow up faster. Meanwhile, Dolly has everyone in the kitchen cooking. Fra complains, "If you're cooking, what is the head chef for?" Dolly responds that the salaries are still being paid, and he takes pride in his excellent culinary skills, which even make the head chef run out in tears. Enrique jokes that Dolly could make a living even if his family fell into ruin. Dina worries that these distractions might affect their work. Dolly explains that the murderers have the home field advantage now. They have already arranged surveillance on this notorious criminal organization within the vampire society, known as Soul Fairy. The organization uses the police to publicize their existence, likely knowing about Vlad's agency, and sending a provocation deliberately. It seems there are also moles within their ranks. The four speculate that Soul Fairy's goal is to present a drama of terror because Origin and all vampires share a mental connection. Origin is an immortal being, and such dramas allow Origin to experience death. Dolly has a deep past with Soul Fairy, having once been their target for assassination. This goes back to a year ago when Dolly was pursuing a noble who preyed on young vampires. This noble, named Belle, locked these youngsters in a basement for autonomy experiments. The vampire victims lost control and were subjected to even more brutal human experiments. When Belle discovered Dolly was on his trail, he manipulated the vampire children he had fed on to attack Dolly's mansion. Dolly instructed his wife to hide while he fought the controlled victims below, but they ambushed and controlled his wife, forcing her to kill her beloved. Dolly almost died when he found Frida, but Fra intervened and killed Frida, feeling immense guilt. Dolly harbors no resentment towards Fra, considering him a lifesaver, as the situation spiraled out of his control. Belle, the noble, was also a member of Soul Fairy, but died in that incident. They are unaware of the full extent of the Soul Fairy organization, but know they must eventually deal with them, as followers of Origin are dangerous. However, waiting may result in more casualties. Vlad operates for the survival of the entire species. Dolly interrupts this conversation. Enrique now understands why Dolly is so attentive to the two children, aiming to compensate for the mother's love they lost. Dolly tells Ur that he will gradually grow up and then enter the cocoon stage, which is adolescence. At this stage, children join a place called clan, where they make friends and learn from each other. During this time, Dolly is both taking care of the children and working. Raphael looks up and sees his father staggering on the upstairs balcony and immediately informs the head maid. The old butler sees Dolly falling from upstairs and swiftly catches him with his agile movements. After fainting, Dolly meets his wife in his unconscious state and proudly assures her that he can take good care of their two children. His wife urges him not to overdo it and expresses guilt for leaving him alone, asking him not to fight alone. Dolly wakes up suddenly, and the headmaid tells him that the young masters are doing well and advises Dolly to rest a bit more. Dolly decisively heads to his office and finds his three teammates amusing the children. Fra also tells Dolly to recover soon. They agree to work while taking care of the children. Dolly nods, saying that after solving the murder case, he wants to have a good time playing with the children. Angelico and the others immediately cheer up. Theodore wants to join them, but is afraid to. The chefs have carefully prepared food for Dolly. After tasting it, Dolly remarks that he has always considered himself excellent, even talented in cooking, but the head chef's skills surpass his imagination, truly worthy of being their family's head chef. The head chef finally relaxes. Meanwhile, the news of Dolly's collapse reaches his superiors. His subordinates feel they can no longer delay, but his boss knows Dolly is waiting for the enemy to slip up. However, their task is to prevent the collapse of Origin. At this moment, 5 members of Soul Fairy kill another group of people, believing they have sent enough messages and are ready to enter the second phase. Their goal is to destroy Origin. Dolly and his team have received news of a new murder case, but it is unclear whether these deaths have affected Origin's mental state. At this time in the clan academy, a teacher named Klaus looks up at the sky, weary and surrounded by buzzing students. Dolly's superior came to meet him specifically, and Dolly shared his parenting insights with him. An adjutant nearby coughed twice to remind them that their mission was more important. Only a few senior officials and a handful of observers know the location and identity of Origin. Everyone's greatest fear is a collapse, which has occurred several times in history. Since all vampires' minds are connected to the immortal Origin, its mental collapse would affect them too. The last collapse happened 80 years ago, when Origin's mental breakdown contaminated the minds of other vampires, leading to numerous suicides worldwide. Thus, Vlad's department exists to keep this deity happy, and Enrique jokes that in some ways it's no different from taking care of children. However, Origin prefers not to interact with others, living a reclusive life with a fragile and unstable mind. If the criminal organization behind the serial killings contacts Origin, it could very likely trigger a new major collapse. At this time, the adjutant went to meet the killer and briefed him on the current investigation. The killers knew of Dolly's existence because they had control over the adjutant's actions. However, the adjutant did not know the location of Origin, which is why they resorted to killing people to force the Vlad agency to protect Origin, hoping to discover its location. They considered using their control to make the adjutant reveal Origin's whereabouts, but every member of the Vlad agency is sworn to secrecy about Origin. Even under control, they would not disclose the secret, which is linked to the abilities of Vlad's hereditary successors. Although they could not make the adjutant disclose the secret, they could threaten him to do other things, such as entering a secret room. Meanwhile, Dolly has been busy caring for his younger son, neglecting his elder son, Raphael. Raphael wanted to talk to his father, but Dolly was focused only on In frustration, Raphael wished didn't exist, which angered Dolly, although he was reluctant to scold his child. Fra suspected Raphael was in his rebellious phase. After calming down, Dolly realized that Raphael had always been obedient, and perhaps he had been neglecting him. Dolly had a long conversation with the head maid, who has 5 sons. She told him that no parent is perfect, and that parenting involves both strict and relaxed moments. If Dolly didn't know what to do for Raphael, he should try his hardest to think of something, as all parents struggle with parenting. Enrique's twin daughters caught Dino to play games with them, then realized Dino didn't know how to play house, making them feel sorry for Theodore. So, they decided to include Theodore in their play. Fra mentioned that there have been no murders in the past week. He believes the killers are likely on their guard. He thinks Dolly is too engrossed in parenting, suspecting that Dolly is cursed by Frida's last words, which he sees as a curse of love. But Dolly told Fra that he is in the same situation. Then, their boss came and reported that secret documents from the Vlad agency stored at headquarters had been stolen. They immediately apprehended the adjutant, who during interrogation left a message urging them to catch those responsible. He revealed they planned to target Origin, and then committed suicide. Investigation showed that the adjutant had been controlled. Although Origin's data was not leaked, all personnel registered with the Vlad agency are now exposed. Dolly's mansion is likely to be attacked, so they need to relocate. At this time, the twin girls found Theodore and invited him to play. Theodore bluntly refused, stating he aims to become a nobleman as outstanding as his father. Members of the Soul Fairy organization first met through referrals. The eccentric Keith wants to stay in the cocoon stage indefinitely, so he uses drugs daily. He doesn't care if Origin actually exists. He just helps in the search to get the drugs that supposedly allow him to return to the cocoon stage. Due to the exposure of Vlad Agency's data, many members have recently been attacked. Therefore, childcare tasks have been temporarily suspended, and the children have been placed in a safe location to wait out the mission. This place is the home of the head maid, as the locations of their 4 mansions have been exposed. Other children are noisy, and the voices in Theodore's mind are also loud, leading him to inadvertently shout at them to be quiet, but he was misunderstood as being harsh to the other children. Raphael jumped off his bed and went to his brother Ur's room. The head maid asked why he was unhappy lately. Raphael admitted he does not like his brother because his father only seems to care about The head maid sighed, realizing the child was just lonely. Meanwhile, all members of the Vlad agency are evacuating. The children at Dolly's mansion have also been arranged for. As the leader of the investigation team for this incident, Dolly decides to use his boss, John, as bait to lure out the enemy members. After all, John's family has a tradition of succession. Their mission is to stabilize Origin. If John unfortunately dies, his son can still succeed him. John shared some bad news with them. Lunt, the second in command of the Vlad agency, chose not to evacuate. Dolly and Fra had no choice but to personally persuade him. All vampires pass through a cocoon stage and must attend a clan for training, which functions much like an academy. Young noble heirs make their mark there. Dolly and Fra were classmates, and their fathers were both allies and rivals within the clan. Dolly pointed out that with Lunt not evacuating, they now had 2 baits, complicating their operation. However, as a noble, Lunt has his dignity and disdains fleeing for his life. Dolly believes that Vlad's duty is to stabilize Origin, and a slight loss of pride is acceptable. Lunt remarked that Dolly and his father are not alike. At that moment, Enrique and Dino, who were guarding outside, were attacked with hypnotic gas. They immediately bit their tongues to regain consciousness. However, the enemy organization had already launched an attack. Both men, already affected by the gas, were no match for the physically strong girl and a slave accompanying her. Dolly and Fra noticed the attackers and quickly pulled Lunt behind them. But 3 attackers were approaching, and after defeating Enrique and Dino, the strong girl, Kiki, who had previously attacked Dolly's mansion and was the only one who escaped, rushed to the 2nd floor. This confirmed her involvement with the Soul Fairy. As Dolly and Fra fought against the 5 attackers, Kiki punched through the floor. The enemy seized the opportunity to capture Lunt. Keith tried to tempt Lunt, offering him greater power if he would reveal the secrets of origin. Despite the confidentiality agreement and his noble dignity, Lunt chose to take his own life after being captured rather than betray his values. The noble didn't care about origin. He just wanted to see it destroyed, symbolizing the end of eternity and immortality. The group of 5 attackers, seeing they could not sway Lunt, quickly threw a smoke bomb and escaped. The investigation was handed over to the Blood Alliance police. Dolly and his group were disappointed but accelerated their investigation, as the death of a noble was less concerning than the potential collapse of origin. Meanwhile, when the headmaid went to the room to call the children for a meal at mealtime, she discovered that all the young masters and ladies were missing. Also disappeared. At that time, the twins' mother came looking for them. Before the adults left in the morning, they had spoken to the children. Dolly told Raphael, as Ur's only older brother, to protect his brother if anything happened to him. On the other side, Theodore glanced at Dino. The doll said he liked to act tough, even though he really wanted to say goodbye to his father. That's why Theodore was in a bad mood today. Annoyed by the children's noise, he complained it disturbed his reading. The twins tried to get him to play hide-and-seek, but Theodore, waving his hand without thinking, accidentally hit one of the girls, Angelico, in the face. She immediately got upset and demanded an apology from Theodore, leading to a scuffle between them. At this point, the headmaid came over. The twin sisters had calmed down, and Angelico apologized obediently after the maid's intervention. However, Theodore was still overwhelmed by the voice of the doll in his head, telling him he was a child too, and should apologize and get along with everyone. Unable to stand the noise, he felt very disturbed. The headmaid wondered what had happened. Then, the twins' mother, Kate, appeared. She suggested that Theodore might have seen a hallucination of the cocoon stage. According to the twins, Kate and Enrique's marriage was a political alliance, and both were members of the Vlad Agency. Meanwhile, Dino's family butler, Hit, also arrived, stating he acted as Theodore's surrogate mother. Theodore is only 7 years old. Children typically enter the cocoon stage around age 13. However, early maturation is not unheard of. During this stage, children may experience auditory and visual hallucinations, delusions, and jealousy, leading to their being taken into a clan for management and education. Theodore's situation likely stems from Dino's high expectations, pushing him to his limits unconsciously. Theodore usually ignores everyone, but when Angelico said she needed to go to the bathroom, he put down his book and accompanied her. Just after bringing Angelico back, they found Raphael holding and threatening to get rid of his brother. Angelico immediately screamed that this was not acceptable. Hearing this, the twin sisters also disagreed and pulled Theodore to intervene, as he claimed he was no longer a child. Thus, a group of children chased after Raphael. Meanwhile, the 4 adults were arguing. Kate and Ale planned to take the children away, yet all were connected to Vlad. The headmaid feared it would be more dangerous to leave and invited them to stay for a meal and discuss things after Dolly and the others returned. When they did return, they were met with the distressing news that the children were missing. Dino also learned from Kate that he had pushed Theodore too hard, causing him to show premature signs of the cocoon stage. At this moment, the children followed Raphael into the street. Raphael explained that he would not really abandon he just wanted to make his father anxious because his father only seemed to care about his younger brother. He also wanted his father's attention. The twins and Angelico agreed, feeling the same way. Theodore was stunned, realizing everyone felt the same, so he decided to help and asked Raphael where he planned to go. Raphael intended to visit the home of John, a regular visitor to their house and a superior to Dolly, hoping John could reprimand their father. However, the children didn't know John's address, and they were even unsure of their current location. Moreover, a group of adults had noticed them, aiming to extort money from these noble children. They were rescued by Kiki, who passed by and loved cute kids. After driving away the bad people, Kiki allowed Theodore and the others to leave. Shortly after, they found several children crying on a bridge. Upon asking where they wanted to go and learning they were looking for John, Kiki, who had obtained information on Vlad members, knew John's residence and drove them there. Unexpectedly, among them were Dolly's children. Thus, she informed her organization, marking John's mansion as the next target for an attack, while Dolly and others were already on their way there. John kept the children at his home and took the opportunity to have a heart-to-heart with Theodore. He noticed Theodore's tendency to act tough and his reluctance to admit he was still a child. John told him that childhood happens only once and it's important to cherish these moments, as everyone eventually grows up. Theodore, unusually, did not argue back. Just then, Kiki and her group burst into the mansion. As Dolly and his group arrived, they found the mansion on fire, and the Blood Alliance police inside were subdued. Enrique and others cleared the way for Dolly, who entered the mansion and immediately engaged in combat with 3 others, using the altercation to jump to the second floor. Meanwhile, John was struggling against Keith and the Mask Man. Despite his age and being outnumbered, he was soon knocked unconscious. Outside, 3 others awaited support from Kate and Hit, and quickly moved to assist Dolly inside. Dolly, fighting 2 opponents while trying to protect the children, injured Keith, but was caught off guard by the Mask Man. Raphael, seeing his father in trouble, rushed to attack the assailant but was kicked away by the Mask Man, who declared his intent to seek revenge on the Origin. Dolly sensed something odd about this person, identifying him as a half-vampire. Soon, 3 more joined the fray, making it 5 against Dolly. He was stabbed by the Mask Man and would have likely succumbed if not for his teammates' timely arrival to save him. Seeing that reinforcements had arrived for Dolly, the 5 decided not to linger. They carried the unconscious John and the other children and fled. Dolly felt guilty, realizing that his own parenting proposal had put the children in danger. Fra slapped him, saying it wasn't the time to blame but to recover quickly to find the children. Before being taken away, Raphael had hidden sleeping The child started crying loudly, and the adults found him in a corner. The Blood Alliance police, who had lost control, were sent to the hospital. Once control is lost, it cannot be easily regained, so these officers were temporarily detained. All members of the Vlad organization had signed confidentiality agreements with John to prevent leaking information about the Origin, suspecting the kidnappers wanted to use the children as leverage against John. However, John's family had long been guardians of the Origin, and the safety of the Origin was critical to their race's future. John was unlikely to yield to such threats. Despite being part of the Vlad organization and understanding the stakes, Enrique remarked that he was, after all, a father and couldn't bear to see his children harmed. He hoped John could buy them some time as they figured out a rescue plan. After 7 episodes, they're still not focusing on important matters. The children weren't properly looked after, and now they've been captured by the enemy. Dolly entrusted to the care of the headmaid and the butler, then returned with his team to their original mansion. There, he mentioned discovering a hybrid of human and vampire among the group. The scent of a hybrid is unpleasant to purebloods. Dolly had a reason for returning to the mansion. Someone had secretly copied information about the Origin and stored it in the basement. After encountering the half-vampire, Dolly recalled an incident from a year ago, the disappearance case in the border village of Nebla, inhabited entirely by half-vampires. It seems the whole village vanished due to something related to the Origin. The Mask Man, seeking revenge on the Origin, is likely a survivor from that village. Unexpectedly, after the children were captured, they were not mistreated. Instead, they quickly adapted to the enemy environment and started playing hide-and-seek there, as bullying young ones would be too disgraceful. Moreover, since Kiki had helped them before, the children had a favorable impression of her. They were only truly afraid of the half-vampire, Mask Man. Meanwhile, Keith had already taken people to interrogate John. Initially, John denied the existence of the Origin, but Keith claimed that Mask Man had seen the Origin with his own eyes. Keith didn't know why they were searching for the origin, only that his boss wanted it found. John described the origin as a fragile deity, stating they should not interfere too much but merely observe from afar. Keith, suffering from cocoon stage poisoning, wanted to see the immortal origin tortured. He even threatened that if John didn't reveal the truth within a week, they would kill the children in front of him. However, Kiki took good care of Raphael and the others, even spending money to set up a hideout to make it more comfortable for the children. But Theodore only wanted to go back, declaring himself the next heir of his family. Mask Man intended to kill Theodore, but Kiki stopped him. She wouldn't allow them to harm the children. Catalina, standing nearby, seemed to know Mask Man's past. Dolly and his team located Enrique's wife, Kate, who is the head of Vlad's intelligence service. Dolly stated his intention to investigate the history of Nebla village, where children born of vampire and human parents face discrimination in any society. Due to their mixed heritage, they inherently suffer from diseases and have short lifespans. Therefore, they fled to Nebla village to seek refuge and fervently worshiped the origin, believed to grant eternal life. However, a year ago, the origin suddenly visited the village, seemingly on a whim, and took absolute control. This led to a mental breakdown, and the villagers began to kill each other. Despite the massacre, there were 3 survivors: a baby now in a mixed orphanage, a teenager adopted by a human hunter handling the aftermath, and one person whose whereabouts are unknown. This individual, named Shad, once acted as the village mayor. He was found severely burned, and Dolly confirmed that Shad is the Mask Man. Catalina told Kiki that Shad, when drunk, had spoken of his past. He was born in the hidden town of Grey Cat and met his destiny there. Shad, a hybrid, was abandoned at birth by his parents and was picked up and raised by another hybrid woman. However, hybrids do not live long, and after his foster mother died of illness, Shad survived by drinking her blood. As a hybrid shunned by purebloods, he was beaten in the streets until a girl named Rosa took pity on him and brought him to Nebla village, populated by other hybrids. Shad grew up there and, unsurprisingly, fell in love with Rosa. However, Rosa loved someone else. Shad had kept his feelings hidden, but everything changed when the origin descended upon the village, leading to chaos and villagers killing each other under its control. Shad found Rosa dead and intended to die in the fire with her, but was unexpectedly rescued. He escaped before fully recovering from his injuries, and with nothing left, Shad was consumed by hatred. Kiki acknowledged that Shad had suffered greatly, but she still would not allow anyone to harm the children. In his quest for revenge against the origin, Shad somehow contacted the leader of Soul Fairy, a group that worships the origin as a deity. Initially, their views were completely opposed to Shad's, but they decided to use him for a task, and thus agreed to his request. Kiki's reason for staying with Soul Fairy was simple. She wanted to permanently remain in the cocoon stage, so she needed their drugs. She knew she had no happy future, and at this point, Shad was also seriously ill. Time was running out for them. Following the trail of the survivors from that time, Dolly and his team first found the teenager who had been adopted by the human hunter. Rosa had met the origin and prayed for eternal life, but the origin did not respond. The truth was different from what Shad drunkenly revealed. Rosa, a fervent believer of the origin, was rejected and ended up biting everyone in the village, gaining control over them, and then making them kill each other. Shad, trying to protect the person he loved, killed other villagers but was controlled by Rosa and ended up killing her. The human hunter who dealt with the aftermath told Dolly and his team that he had indeed seen the origin in the village and that it was impossible to kill it using any means. Most of the villagers were fervent followers of the origin, desperate for eternal life. To the origin, these people were like annoying flies, and perhaps the village was destroyed because the origin grew tired of these zealous followers. Dolly found the hunter's information relevant, and this might also explain why John advised Vlad against contacting the origin. The adopted child is human and was abandoned near the village, hence was picked up by the villagers. The boy, named Wanley, knew about Shad and described him as an unpleasant person. Wanley disliked vampires and preferred not to discuss the past. However, after learning that several children were kidnapped, he revealed what he knew and mentioned that Shad, who was very ill at the time, had visited him recently. Shad told Wanley that he was one of the few survivors of the village and could seek him out in Greycat Street if he ever faced difficulties. Aware that these people would likely kill Shad, Wanli asked them to ensure his death was painless. Despite disliking Shad, Wanli knew he wasn't truly evil and felt obliged to help out of a sense of shared community. Dolly and his team found the hideout on Greycat Street. Knowing his time was limited, Shad brought the children to John and demanded the location of the origin, threatening to kill the children in front of him. As he was about to harm one of the twins, Angelico rushed forward and was kicked away. Kiki charged in, unable to tolerate harm to the children, leading to internal conflict within the team. As Kiki was being ganged up on and her companion fell, Raphael rushed to her aid and blocked a knife, which luckily only passed under his armpit without injuring the child. John eventually softened and revealed that the origin was hidden within the clan. The next second, Dali and his team burst in. Dali encountered Kiki, and he and Fra knocked her out and tied her up. Meanwhile, Dino ran into Catalina and another person. Dino removed his coat, ready to engage in close combat. Theodore, protecting a frightened Raphael, spotted a dagger nearby, picked it up, and took the opportunity to stab Keith in the thigh. Unexpectedly, Shad stabbed Keith, claiming his injury would only slow them down. As a vampire in the cocoon stage with special abilities, Shad had taken a drug to restore his cocoon stage powers and controlled Keith by touch. When Dolly and his team had everyone under control and arrived at the scene, they found the children still there. Dolly hugged Raphael tightly while the twin sisters pulled Enrique along, saying that Theodore and Angelico had fought the enemy. Angelico was praised by Fra. Theodore felt he failed to save John. Dino told Theodore, still considering him as a noble heir, that it was okay for children to be occasionally spoiled, and hugged him, causing Theodore to cry. Just as they rescued Raphael, they discovered that Catalina, who had sneaked away, had unexpectedly gone home to find Shad and Catalina took and the old butler was no match for them in combat. The head maid insisted on following them as the two had no idea how to change diapers. After some thought, Catalina agreed, since they needed to keep alive. Dolly and his team heard this news upon their return. Catalina was able to find the place because the children, having been kidnapped, wanted to go home. Catalina cleverly extracted information, and by the time it was noticed, it was too late to stop her, revealing location at the head maid's home. Dino patted his son's head, confident they would bring back. They then had dinner with the children and tidied up. After putting all the children to sleep, the interrogation information came through. Keith, who was stabbed, was being treated in the hospital, but seemed to have fallen into a deep sleep. Meanwhile, Kiki revealed information, stating that John had disclosed the origin's location within the clan. She is in the cocoon stage and very affectionate towards the children. To be precise, she loves everything, which is somewhat abnormal. She just needs to stop taking the medication and enter the growth stage. However, some children might be controlled by the cocoon stage and become fanatical. No one expected that the origin would be teaching in the clan. Normally, the clan is strictly managed and does not allow outsiders in. However, the annual clan festival is approaching, showcasing the students' abilities. The normally closed gates will be open to the outside world. By pretending to be a guest, one can legitimately enter the clan. Dolly and his team were discussing how to rescue Theodore, worried about couldn't resist and eavesdropped outside the door. Other children who hadn't slept also came over. Seeing this, the adults decided to read them a picture book to soothe them. Dolly assured Theodore not to worry, as they would handle the difficulties. Shad took John away, claiming he had a way to kill the origin. His cocoon stage ability was to enter others' inner worlds, but this ability disappeared after adulthood. However, with the hallucinogen from Soul Fairy, he regained this ability. Shad had used this on Rosa and discovered she was already in love with someone else. Shad believed that even the immortal origin must have an inner world. By killing his spirit, he would die, leaving only a body behind. Meanwhile, the head maid was talking with Catalina, who did not stop her from soothing to sleep and shared her past. Catalina revealed that not every child is born awaited. She was abandoned by her parents at birth. Shad was similar, also of mixed heritage, and his life was nearing its end, a fact palpable to others. Just being alive was painful for Shad. Catalina, once Shad's teacher, knew he was doing all this to avenge Rosa. The head maid reflected, realizing that Shad too had once loved someone. Not long after, the clan's grand festival was about to begin. Dali and his team entrusted the children to Kate and Hit and prepared to head to the clan to capture someone. John's life was spared because his kidnapping had not been made public. Otherwise, it would have been a major embarrassment for the Blood Alliance leadership. Meanwhile, Shad and his group changed clothes, ready to disguise themselves as John's servants to enter the clan. And the head maid were to be used as hostages to threaten him. Dali and his team also changed into formal attire. Initially, several children insisted on going with them, but Theodore calmed them down, promising to take care of the other children as well. It seems that after reconciling with his father, the dolls no longer came looking for Theodore. Dali and his team had also figured out Shad's plan, which is why they ordered the news of John's capture to be kept under wraps. Dali fondly recalled his time at the clan academy. Back then, he was reluctant to train or study and did not want to participate in the clan festival. He even wished to remain in the cocoon stage indefinitely. Nonetheless, he and Fra were still the top students of their class. As members of a high-ranking noble class, the four quickly met with the clan leader. Upon arrival, they inquired about a teacher named Klaus. The leader immediately dismissed others and agreed to cooperate with the Vlad agency to discreetly search for Klaus. Only a few knew that Klaus was the origin. Dali and his team also had to conceal their operations while searching for someone from Soul Ferry. Shad also learned about Klaus's existence. Catalina asked the students about this teacher, but to them, Klaus was an odd figure. Surprisingly, Dali was the first to find Klaus. He approached him decisively for a conversation. Klaus advised him not to get involved with him. The next second, Dali saw Klaus disappear, and his wife appeared in front of him. Just as Dali was about to take his wife's hand, the cry of a child woke him from the illusion. Dali realized he was nearly about to jump off a building. It seemed Klaus's mental state was precarious. He also recognized that it was Ur's crying that awakened him. Upon hearing the cries, the four dads made their way to the square. Dino was searching for someone in the crowd when Shad stabbed him from behind. Dino, without making a sound, grabbed Shad's neck in retaliation. Unexpectedly, he found himself in his inner world, where Shad commented on Dino's strong ego, mocking him for creating an exaggeratedly tall image of himself in his inner world, while being insignificant in reality. Dino punched Shad out of the mental realm. Shad quickly fled with Catalina, who was holding Dino, injured, fell down while John and the headmaid stayed to care for him. Dali and Fra gave chase. They burst into a fencing tournament to prevent the surrounding crowd from panicking. Dali falsely claimed they were conducting a swordsmanship demonstration for the juniors and joined Fra in a coordinated fight against Shad. As top academy students, they naturally overpowered Shad. However, Shad took as a hostage and ran off with Catalina. Enrique intercepted them halfway. Shad used his mind-reading ability on Enrique, discovering that Enrique had lived his life according to others' expectations, bearing the nobility's honor. Even with his mind read, Enrique remained unshaken. Now a father of two, often worn out by his children, he had little concern for noble pretenses. Just as Shad was being subdued, Catalina intervened, allowing them to escape again. Dino awoke and, despite his injuries, decided to fight. Meanwhile, Shad, running out of time, looked up to see Klaus in the crowd, the real master of the vampire species. The moment Shad saw Klaus, he rushed up and stabbed him. The bystanders were ready to call the guards, but Klaus controlled their memories, making them ignore the incident. Ur's loud crying gave Dali a direction to follow. Shad caught up and questioned Klaus why he would strip those people of their memories using his authority. Klaus said he did not wish to use his power, as those people were not his slaves, but he wanted to avoid a bigger scene. Shad then demanded to know why Klaus had destroyed Nebla village, only to find that Klaus had no memory of it. Given his long life, he couldn't remember everything. Furious, Shad stabbed him again, but Klaus, being immortal, remained unharmed. Catalina, frightened, stepped back. Shad gave up physical attacks and hugged Klaus, intending to enter his mind and kill him there. Inside Klaus's mind, Shad found only numerous coffins, all empty, until he unearthed one at the mountaintop. At this sight, all vampires began to cry, as their greatest fear seemed to have arrived. Before Shad could dig further, Dali, wiping away his tears, separated the two. Catalina picked up and threatened him. Shad also questioned Dolly about giving up on his child. However, Fra and others arrived, and as nobles bearing responsibilities, whether it was about continuing their race's future or saving their own child, it was their duty to act. Shad was running out of strength. He said he just wanted to avenge his fellow villagers and punish the origin that destroyed their village. However, Klaus said he had been punished for thousands of years. Shad grew even angrier, finding it ironic that a short-lived half-breed desired immortality, while for an origin like Klaus, eternal life was a punishment. Unable to kill Klaus, Shad, in a fit of rage, prepared to target Dolly saw Catalina was about to act, so Jia Yi stepped forward to distract Shad. Catalina took this opportunity to bite Shad's neck, seizing his authority, and returned to Dolly. She then threw a smoke bomb and fled with Shad. Dino asked Klaus why, as the deity of all vampires, he chose to stay in the clan as a teacher. Klaus responded that he was simply bored, needing something to pass the endless time, yet ironically, he was also the origin. The Vlad organization could only watch him from a distance. Klaus felt deeply troubled whenever he thought about those who prayed to him for immortality. Catalina urged Shad to leave with her. Shad questioned why she didn't control him with her authority. Catalina wanted him to live. By then, Dolly and the others had arrived. Catalina informed them that Shad didn't have much time left and pleaded for them not to attack, allowing him to leave peacefully. However, Shad felt that the nobles looked down on half-breeds. Unexpectedly, Dolly told Catalina to use her authority to let Shad experience a beautiful dream about his hometown. In the dream, Shad saw Rosa and returned to his youth, meeting friends from the village. The painful memories seemed like a nightmare that dissipated among friends. Catalina initially intended to poison herself and leave with Shad, but Dolly knocked the poison away, suggesting that mistakes still warranted punishment. Over a decade later, Raphael and Angelico had grown up. Angelico vaguely remembered being kidnapped as a child. They had been part of the Blood Alliance for 4 years and vowed to surpass their fathers. After finishing their tasks at the Blood Alliance, they packed up to meet the twin sisters, whom they hadn't seen since before joining the clan. At that moment, Theodore, burdened with a stack of books, approached. Despite proclaiming he would inherit the family business during his childhood, he chose to become a writer, a rare path for a high-class vampire noble typically expected to work at the Blood Alliance. They gathered to welcome who had graduated from the clan after completing the cocoon stage, back home. Returned with a friend named Sophie, who had also just finished the cocoon stage. Since they were good friends, Angelico invited Sophie to join them for dinner, which turned out to be a pleasant evening. The twin sisters took a carriage home first, followed by Theodore and Fra leaving, and Sophie departing for her own commitments. Raphael chatted with his brother mentioning that he had made some good friends and that their father was waiting at home for them. Not long after, Raphael walked down the aisle, soon welcoming a child with his beloved wife. The cries of the baby woke Dolly, who suddenly realized it was his own baby, crying. It turned out he had been dreaming all along. After losing his wife, Dolly longed to see his children grow up. After Catalina was captured, she informed Kiki of Shad's death. Kiki, who dreamed of staying in the cocoon stage forever, envied Keith, who remained unconscious because of Shad. However, Catalina wished to see her grow up. Kiki regretfully mentioned that his cocoon stage was about to end. Unexpectedly at that moment, the Soul Fairy hijacked the prison van, indicating that the van's route had been leaked. Upon hearing the news, Enrique and his team realized there was a mole within Vlad. Meanwhile, John had abdicated, and the duty to protect Klaus continued without pause. However, Dolly and Fra were not present. They had gone to the cemetery to visit Dolly's wife's grave. Fra felt guilty towards Raphael. After all, he had killed Dolly's wife, but Dolly had instructed Fra not to disclose this to Raphael. Fra could only encourage Raphael to become an exemplary noble. After a recent kidnapping incident, Raphael understood the importance of protecting his brother. The butler was deeply moved by their dedication. The leader of Soul Fairy, a devout follower of Origin, knew that every action of Origin could impact their entire race. Thus, he wished to keep Origin happy. However, Kiki was uninterested in this. She wanted to remain in the cocoon stage indefinitely. The leader smiled and explained that the cocoon stage was when vampires felt the most emotionally rich and were deeply connected to Origin. Therefore, they needed vampires to stay in the cocoon stage forever. At that time, a priest brought the leader a baby, the same age as and the one from Dolly's dream who became close friends with Sophie, the sole survivor from Nebla village. However, the leader planned not to wait for his cocoon stage, but to use the child for a blood ritual instead. After the mission, the nursery disbanded, but the children's fathers became friends. They occasionally gathered their children for play and picnics. During one such outing, they were surprised to see stand up. Dolly immediately showed a dumbfounded fatherly expression. He thought, damn, being a widowed father raising children is truly delightful. If only the main storyline's murder case could be told a bit better.